All right, so let me describe what we're going to deal with on this particular play. The white hat is near the goal line, and the red team is going to punt. I'll hit play here, and I'm going to stop it when confusion is going to occur. Right there. So we've got a blocked punt by the white team, the team in white, and I believe that's the punter actually pursuing the R player in white. And the referee is actually in pretty decent position. We'd want the referee at the goal line. It's interesting, over the last few weeks we've heard Terrence Miles, as an NFL back judge, say his favorite sound is the sound of a blocked punt, because from that point forward, all the action somewhere else. Well, this is a case where the referee hears blocked punt and says, "Oh shit." So now we've got a ball bouncing around at the 5-yard line. And so the question that we're dealing with is force, and how force in the rule book plays into what we do with this play. And again, we just happened to pregame this conversation. Invite whoever's. So you can see the referee goes up, signals touchback pretty quick, maybe even a little too quick. Maybe some communication with this wing coming downfield or upfield. Maybe some discussion would be beneficial. But this is, you see the white hat start to signal a little bit of that timeout signal where you flap your arms about a dozen times. What the hell was that? And so we've got a touchback. And so what I want to do is dive into the rule book, and I will share with you that the referee went to the sideline and told the coach, this is a touchback, even though R blocked the punt and it's recovered in the end zone. The receiving team head coach, it didn't matter what rule was recited, he was not happy, because he just gave the ball back to the kicking team at the 20-yard line. And it was a long, long conversation. So my point here is, let's figure out how to get this right so that when the replay discussion occurs, we're in a good position to talk through it. So as I start putting this PowerPoint up and talk through the rule book, Scott, do you have anything you want to add to that particular play as I jump in here?
One thing I do remember with the play is I was the sideline official on that side, and I remember after the play, you and I came together to talk about it before we went over the sideline, before you went over to the sideline, to basically talk about what happened, what did we see. And the big question that we asked each other at the time was, would the ball have gone into the end zone had the receiving team not gone and picked it up? And that's really where the crux of it comes down to with force in this particular case. And
that is exactly where we're going to spend our time in the rule book here. All right, so we are going to focus on Rule 213.1 to start with, and we're going to break this down. The rule says force is the result of energy exerted by a player which provides momentum of the ball. The term force, and I will share with you, before this play happened to us, our crew, to be honest, I kind of was afraid of diving into the force in the rule book. But this happened, and it caused me to dive in and figure out how to present this so that anybody can rule on this at any time. The term force is used only in connection with a goal line, and it's in one direction. This is kind of weird the way this says this. From the field of play into the end zone is an example of that. And when it says only one direction, I just think that means it isn't like multiple bounces or directions. It is in one direction only. And then we'll break down the rest of this. But the term force is used only as an example from the field of play into the end zone. And so that is exactly the rule that we're dealing with, is how did this ball get in the end zone?
Hey, Kirk, can I?
Yes, please.
So what the one direction is saying is that really force only matters. It boils down to, how did the ball get in the end zone? So the one direction is basically saying it doesn't matter if it comes out of the end zone. It doesn't matter if it's going to the sideline. All that matters is field of play to end zone. That's the only thing that matters for force. So that's what it's referring to with that one direction bit.
Okay, so the next breakdown of this particular rule, we're going to talk about the two types of forces that we're dealing with when we're talking about force. One of them is, and it's in this same rule, 213.1, initial force, and it's got a list of ways that this initial force is caused, and it results from a carry, a fumble, a kick, a pass, or a snap. And there's going to be some small print after you see the word snap, and we'll get into that one on the next slide. A new force, however, may result from a bat, an illegal kick, or a muff. And we've seen some different plays on our evening reviews of those acts, illegal kicks or illegal muffs or just muffs. And so a new force can result after the initial force is caused. And it's all about, as Scott was talking about, how'd the ball get into the end zone? And in this case, the question revolves around, do we have a new force? And that's the debate on this particular play. And so this is still more breakdown of this same rule. I haven't left rule 213.1. This is that small print from the last one. After a fumble, kick, or backward pass has been grounded, and that's a critical piece where I've got underlined there. That ball has to be grounded. Now a new force may result from a bat, an illegal kick, or a muff. So just as in a blocked punt has its initial force is the kick going one way away from the end zone in this case, the ball was blocked by the receiving team. That is not a new force because at that point in time, the ball had not been grounded. However, subsequent to the blocked kick, the ball is bouncing on the turf, and now we have the potential for a new force. A new force. Now, I didn't say it was. I said it can be. And now we get into some judgment components of the rule book. The responsibility for forcing the ball from the field of play across the goal line is attributed to the player who blah, 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 fumbles, kicks the ball, unless a new force is applied to either a kick, fumble that has hit the ground. So another way to say that last slide I showed you. Rule 851, responsibility. This is almost a repeat. Responsibility for forcing the ball from the field of play across the goal line is it attributed to that player who fumbles, kicks the ball, fumbles or kicks the ball unless a new force is applied. And so we see this playing out in this particular play. And then the reminder what a muff is. I think we all are familiar with what a muff is. It is the touching of a loose ball by a player in an unsuccessful attempt to secure the ball. So now I want to get into a couple more plays as we break this down.
Well, I mean, just with that particular play, I think that's really what it came down to. And part of it was because of how close it was to the goal line when the receiver picked it up. If it had happened at the 5-10 yard line where he did that, I don't think there would have been much debate that it was a new force. In this case, because it was close to the goal line, there's a case play. I don't have my case book in front of me, but it kind of has a similar situation to this where the case book essentially says the covering official, who in this case is the referee, has to make a judgment call of whether that ball would have entered the goal line or entered the end zone had that additional, force by the receiving team been applied. In this case, we decided on the field. I mean, obviously we didn't have the luxury of replay. We decided that no, that ball would have come short. And so our coming in to try to pick it up was what caused it to actually go in the goal line or in the end zone. On the film, I could see justification either way. I mean, I personally think we still got it right, but I can see, if we'd called it the other way, the film could justify it both ways. Unfortunately, with this angle, it's just hard to tell exactly when it really came to stopping that motion towards the goal line.
And so I'm going to show you a couple more slides as Scott was alluding to. The casebook has some support for this to guide us. And he and I have had some debate whether we got this right or wrong over the years. But let's start with the easy one. This is the one we hope we have. Ball is blocked, goes into the end zone, recovered by R. No doubt. Ball was blocked into the end zone. It was the force, or it was the kick, not any other action, because the blocked kick does not create a new force. Therefore, the kicking team, the red team, caused the ball to go in the end zone because you cannot have a new force until the ball is grounded, until that kick is grounded, I should say. Anything else on this, Scott? I think the key, it is a tough coverage for a white hat. And Steve, if you've got, Steve Coover, if you've got anything to add in any of these plays, love to hear it. We try to emphasize when we're in a punt formation, the coverage of that goal line If we're too far outside the 5-yard line, it's really tough to get much support out of our wings. But if that ball is blocked, there's nothing downfield that we need to be paying attention to. It comes back to the goal line and that end line.
Yeah, I think
go ahead.
On this one, I think one thing that makes it really easy is the fact that the receiving team ended up with possession in the end zone, because if that happens, there's really only one answer, and that's touchdown. The force part really only comes to play when you're deciding between a safety and a touchback.
That's a good point. The other thing is, as I'm looking at this, once that ball crosses the goal line, as a white hat, there is no reason to worry about the goal line anymore. Our eyes really need to be on, or at least close enough to the end line to rule on possession in the end zone versus out. I mean, the recovery obviously is critical, who ends up with the ball. But once it crosses the goal line, get off the goal line, because that line does not matter anymore. And all of a sudden, we've got a bare end line to cover. And now all of a sudden, we got maybe the ball's in, maybe it's out. I was going to point out, I'm not a big fan of finger whistles with white hats. I think this kind of looks odd, coming up with one hand and then two, especially when we're looking for a signal of touchback or touchdown. All right, we're going to jump to the next one. But that one's the easy one. The ball obviously went into the end zone under its original force, and that being the kick, the initial force. So here is another easy one. We're going to have the white team punt, get the punt blocked. Big lumbering number 65 picks up the ball, carries it across the 5, fumbles it out of the end zone. I'll replay it here while I let somebody in the meeting. Uh-oh. Scott, you're seeing the video, correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so what we should have seen here is K kicks the ball, gets blocked. R picks it up off the ground, carries it about, 15 yards, 20 yards, gets it stripped, ball runs out of the end zone. Again, I'm trying to take advantage of some of the easy ones. So there is no doubt in my mind that R's action, R fumbled or recovered and then fumbled the ball across the goal line and out of the end zone. I think we all would agree this is no doubt a touchback, because R was the force, the fumble by R was the force that put it in the end zone. You got anything else on this one, Lewis?
The only thing that I don't think this would confuse most people, but just something maybe for newer officials, just to note that from a rules perspective, stripping the ball is just a fumble. So even if that white player right there was the one that kind of pulled it out of his hands, the fumble is the fault of the responsibility of the player who had possession. It doesn't matter why he fumbled, how he fumbled. All that matters is he had possession, he lost possession. That's a fumble, and so it's on him.
I think we could use the same. We do a lot of what ifs on this, but let's just say as he fumbled it right there. Let's say the ball just stopped on a dime and didn't go any further than let's just say it's at the 4. Let's say it just stops right there, and let's even use and we'll talk later out of the casebook. Let's say the ball bounces back towards the field of play, and the white player trying to possess it before it goes in the end zone forces it in the end zone. Now we've got a different situation.
Right.
But in this case, it's obvious the fumble went all the way through, crossed the goal line, crossed the end line. The kicking team will have the ball at the 20-yard line with a touchback. And I think these are, for white hats, these really get tough. Like this potential possession right here at the end of the play, whether it's in the end zone or out of the end zone, whether his body was out of bounds when he secured the ball in the end zone. Those are tough actions, especially when all the momentum is headed out of the back of the end zone. All right, we're going to get into the trickier ones. Very similar to the first one we looked at, punt formation. So white hats, even though we're snapping it from the 40-yard line, don't let your guard down. We're going to watch the punter get the punt blocked. Now, in this case, the punter heads back to get the ball. And so the question about force is not existing. Who forced it in the end zone? Because it's either a kicked ball or, and the black jersey player here is actually on the kicking team. So whether he is ruled to have forced it in the end zone during this little bit of fumble, it's irrelevant because it's either the kick or it's him, regardless. If the black team, K, recovers it in the end zone, it's a safety. In this case, the referee rules possession inbounds before he goes out of bounds and quickly rules, after some thought, I shouldn't say quickly rules, after some thought, probably looks to the sideline for some help, confirm, touchdown. The last thing we would want to do as white hats here is change our opinion about this. I don't know how you're going to do it. So we need to be careful. We have to be confident that if you're going to signal touchdown, that's no doubt. Same thing with touchback. Make sure we get this right on our initial signal and don't have to explain why we had to overrule that. I know we say we got to get it right, but that would be a tough one to explain if we come back and say, oh, sorry, yeah, it's a touchback or a safety in that regard. So, Scott, you got anything else on this particular play?
No, I mean, I think that's the big key with these types of plays is just slow down, especially if you're the white hat here, because you're the one that's going to see this. Slow down, get information. It looks like he pointed to the side, see if he had anything different. I mean, I don't know exactly what he was asking the wing official there, but he slowed down a little bit to get information. I'm kind of confused on why this is a touchdown since nobody has possession, but you know,
he must have ruled possession before it went off the end line.
That could be. I guess I see it now that I see the replay on a little bit more zoomed in there, but. You know, I think he did the right thing. He might have been able to slow down a little bit more. But the white hat there went in, saw it, asked the wing, presumably, did he have possession before he went out of bounds? And then he signaled. So I think this play is a good example of some good mechanics for it. I don't know if he needed to come up into that pile like that other than to maybe separate people. But he's not rushing it. He's getting it right. The play's over. There's no reason to, be hasty with it. But he wants to make sure he gets the information. So I like the mechanics on this play.
Good point. I agree with you. I think if we stay away, I think there's just a natural instinct to get closer to this ball or the players, and I don't think it's necessary. I just think it's natural to do that. But I agree with you. If this is a touchdown at this moment in time, it's going to be a touchdown in a minute. So there's no reason to hurry this up. And I would imagine most of the folks in the crowd probably figured this one out. This one isn't an overly confusing one. One takeaway that I think is of value, if I didn't say it already, I think all five positions could benefit from on any scrimmage kick, and maybe even a scoring kick for that matter. Tell yourself white is, or in this case, dark is kicking, white is receiving. And just maybe repeat that right before the snap, and you might be able to take advantage of that when all of a sudden you're in this tornado of bodies flying around, whether you're a back judge or a referee. I think there's advantage of telling yourself what color is kicking and what color is receiving. So here's another similar play. We've got a blocked kick. It's a little bit tougher to see. It's probably going to be even tougher for you all. I'll slow it down here, but gold team gets their kick blocked. You'll see the screen pan over. And so here's a case where I think you could question whether or not that ball was moved into the end zone by the receiving team or the dark team. Receiving is the black team. But you see this ball slow down and bounce a little bit right there at the 1 yard line. And I hope when we go through the case book, when I go back to the slides, I think we're going to eliminate an opportunity for some doubt here. I can't remember what this ultimately was called. It looks like they're not going to give it to us. But in essence, same story, blocked kick. You can see that this must have been last year because we've got the umpire back there in support of the white hat on this play. So certainly have another pair of eyes that could support what is seen. And if the white hat and the umpire can come together here and just talk through what they believe happened. And again, we don't have a result. I believe this should be ruled. If this ball did in fact go through the end zone and not get possessed in the end zone, I believe this is still a kick and it is therefore a safety. Because, and again, I'm going to talk about the casebook play. If I take it back to about right there, the ball is at the 2 or 3 yard line. And unless there's no doubt that that ball was going to stay out of the end zone, we've got to give the benefit of the doubt to the defense and call this a safety. All right, let me see if the next. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my slides. Scott, I've got a little moment here if you want to talk about anything at this point.
Yeah, I don't really have anything on that last one. It's kind of like that first one. The angle's kind of hard to see for sure. The referee just on all those punt plays, like you said, it doesn't matter if you're at the 40, if you're at the 10, just kind of prepare yourself. I mean, as the white hat, your main responsibility is to watch that punter, and then you're doing cleanup. So just take that extra second and say, all right, what am I going to do if this punt is blocked? What am I going to watch to make sure that I get the right call on new force or whatever I might need to call? And if you don't need it, 99% of the time, great. But don't just go in there assuming it's going to be a regular kick, because that 1 out of 100 times that something weird happens, you want to be ready and prepared for that.
I think this 583 is letter B is just an expansion on that. Same thing we've been talking about. If the new force, unless a new force by R muffs it into the end zone, it's a touchback. Same thing here. Letter C is it's a touchback when a fumble is the force or muff or bat of a backward pass or fumble, blah, 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 which sends the ball across the opponent's goal line. And it goes back to what Scott Lewis was saying. How did the ball get in the end zone? Who's responsible for getting the ball into the end zone? Okay, and that's the takeaway here. Who's responsible for getting the ball into the end zone? So now let's look at a couple casebook plays that I believe help solidify the when in doubt component of force. So 10.4.5i says K1's scrimmage kick is blocked at K's 5 yard line. So very similar to what we were just looking at. So K's kicking from their own 5. The blocked kick is rolling away from K's goal line. So if we can imagine the ball taking that goofy bounce back away from the end zone is what this is describing. When R1 comes up and muffs the ball into K's end zone, in essence, applying a new force to the grounded kick. Now K recovers the ball, attempts to advance, but is downed in the end zone. So K is in possession of a ball in the end zone that R forced in because of the fact that it was rolling away from the end zone. And so then the answers to A, we've got a foul, and I don't want to jump into the administration of fouls, but it is a touchback. Let me see what this I'm getting into the rule here. R1 holds K3 in the end zone. Therefore, it's a touchback, and we're going to go out to the 20 yard line. The basic spot is the 20 yard line because it's a touchback. But it's the fact that R forced that ball into the end zone that the basic spot is the 20 because it's ruled a touchback. So then B says K3 holds R1 in the end zone. So now it's a foul on K. And since the foul is in the end zone, it's a safety. So that letter B is somewhat irrelevant of how that ball got in there. Well, no, it's not, because it's still it's behind the basic spot. Therefore, it's a safety. But bottom line is, when you look at this rolling away from K's goal line, I think that is a critical piece. When in doubt, if that ball is rolling and has any potential to get to the goal line, I think we have to assume it was the kick that caused it to go in, or the block, which is part of the kick, the blocked kick. So here's another one, 833A. So during a try, so this is a little bit weird. So during a try, A1 fumbles, and the ball is nearly at rest at the 3 yard line. If we can imagine this, that Team A is snapping it from the 3, they fumble it, and the ball's just sitting at the 3 yard line, and the defense, B1, is judged to cause the ball to go into the end zone where B recovers. So B caused the ball to go into the end zone. That is the new force that caused the ball to go in the end zone. And the question is, what happens if B recovers and downs the ball in the end zone. And it's actually ruled a safety. It's kind of a weird play to think about, that that A scored a safety because B put the ball into their own end zone on a try. But it could happen on any down, as the ruling says here. If this ball was snapped from the 3-yard line, it was 2nd and goal from the 3, and B forces that ball into the end zone because it was judged to be at rest, and the B caused it to go in, we've got a safety. Letter C, 852C. K1's punt is blocked at the K5, and the ball is slowly rolling near the goal line. R1 attempts to recover and barely touches the ball. The ball then rolls into the end zone where K2 falls on it. So we've got K punting from the 5. It's rolling around near the goal line. R1 tries to pick it up or catch it, but barely touches the ball. The ball then rolls into the end zone, and K falls on it. So the kicking team is falling on it. So this, I think, is the key here. The covering official will have to judge whether or not a new force resulted from R1's touch. If the original force could have been caused by the ball, or could have caused the ball to go into the end zone, regardless of the muff, it's a safety. So when in doubt, the force was supplied by the kick, thus a safety. And I think that's the key here. When in doubt, the force is supplied by that initial force. If R supplied the force, it's a touchback. So I think that whole bouncing away from the goal or having no doubt that ball could have got into the end zone under the initial force. And as Scott and I were talking on that very first play that we had in that the very first force play we showed tonight, I am not 100% sure that ball would not have ultimately rolled into the end zone. And again, the conversation with the coach was not easy, because now all of a sudden we gave the kicking team the ball back at the 20-yard line. I don't think anybody in there would have questioned if we would have ruled that a safety, because the ball may have got in there from the initial kick. Okay, so I've got a couple more plays. Looks like I got somebody chiming in here wanting to be admitted here. All right, I've got a couple more plays. And Scott, do you have anything to add to that while I'm
not for
back
this one.
into our game plays? Stop presenting that and start presenting the tab for. Okay, so now we're done with punts. So we got, I think, 2 plays, and we'll wrap this up. I think some of you may have seen this the other night. This is a snapped ball. This is not a punt situation. It's a quarterback in shotgun formation, and I'll play it through here. We're going to get a view of, I just want to get your bearings. So we're snapping from the 17-yard line. We'll get a close-up. This is a better view of what's going to happen here. So ball goes over the quarterback's head. There's a scramble. Ball ends up possessed by B. Okay, so let's run this through again. Blue is on offense. Quarterback has it snapped over his head. The ball is flushed all the way to a point near the end line. And I believe the referee incorrectly signals touchback here. And the reason and we can break this down. The reason I believe this is, I'm sorry, I jumped to the wrong play. The reason I believe this is incorrect, if the ball was possessed by, sorry, we're still not looking at the right play. If the ball was possessed by B in the end zone, I think we all can agree it's a touchdown. There's no other result if the white team possesses this ball in the end zone. So if the referee deemed this ball to not be possessed and that it's actually on the end line or crossed the end line, now we have to determine how'd the ball get there. And there should be no doubt that this ball was not muffed into the end zone by B, because it looks like that ball could have got there by the action of the snapper's bad snap, which is really a backward pass. So this ball got into the end zone by A's snap, and if it crossed that end line, we've got a safety. Scott, you want to add anything to this?
Yeah, I think one thing with this one that is it's another important point with force is just to go back to that definition. Force only matters from going into the field of play into the end zone. It doesn't matter from the field of play into the end zone. So in this case, like you were saying, if there was contact outside or inside the end zone, and then you're trying to determine, well, it was in the end zone and it got pushed out of bounds, who pushed it out of bounds? That doesn't matter at all. Who pushed out of bounds is irrelevant. All that matters is how it got in the end zone in the first place.
Great point.
It could be that maybe the white hat here, I don't know, might have just gotten things a little mixed up and was just saying, okay, who was the last one to touch it before it went out of bounds? Okay, we'll signal touchback because the defense touched it last. I can't really say what's going through their head, but
sure,
that could be maybe in the heat of the moment they lost track of what that force really meant.
Yes, good point. Yeah, you can see if he says, "Oh well, it was." I think what you're saying is if the white team forced it out of the end zone here, let's call it a touchback. But that would be an irrelevant piece of information. It doesn't matter how it gets out of the end zone; it just matters how it got into the end zone.
Correct.
And we did watch the other night of a legal bat that was in the end zone, which is another level of confusion, but we're not going to get into that tonight. But yeah, this either is a touchdown or a safety. Touchback is not an option because of the way the ball got in the end zone. Okay, the next play, another version of force applied to a non-punting play. So the white team is snapping the ball from about the 17, 18-yard line. And we'll get a toss to the tailback, who may or may not have even possessed it. We'll back it up here. So toss to the tailback. Ball is slick. It's rolling around near the goal line. Again, we've got to ask ourselves, how did the ball get in the end zone? Was it the action of the defender? And I think the better question, the takeaway from tonight, I think has to be, there's no doubt that that ball wouldn't have got in the end zone. And I think that would be tough to rule here. Because there's a chance that this ball could get there on A's efforts or A's force, the initial force. The ball goes in and out of the end zone. I believe the proper signal here is a safety. I'm not sure what the white hat ruled on it.
I think I know this play. It wasn't me. I think because I think we've talked about this. I think they did rule safety on this one. And if I remember
see a touchback
right,
signal at the upper side of the screen. Did you think they changed that?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, and it might be a different play that was similar to this, but I remember talking about one very similar to this, and it was signaled safety. And kind of the ironic thing was that the team that that this went against, in this case the kicking team, was the same team as from that first play.
Oh, the one we had, yeah.
Yeah, so they kind of felt like they were getting kind of double whammy. It's like, well, why was it a touchback when it was them, but not for me? But yeah, it looks like Rouse is saying it was a safety. So,
yeah, I think the tough part on this one, let me see if I can get back to the play. Just the action of the defensive player right as that ball kind of bounces up in his hands. His action kind of makes it look like he leapfrogged that ball into the end zone. Didn't really have possession of it. And that action makes it really look like the ball went or that he caused that to go in the end zone. But again, I go back to the way that casebook play talks about it. If it's still and not moving towards the end zone, we have the potential for B to put it in. If we have it bouncing away from the end zone, we have a chance for B to cause it to go in the end zone. If that ball is just kind of rolling towards the end zone, not very fast, I think we've got to give the benefit of the doubt to the defensive team and say, if that ball is not secured by B in the end zone, we're going to go a safety. That's really the takeaway from this. I was hoping to talk a little bit more about what other things we can do to avoid just having your head spin as a white hat. Where I always like to talk about, where does your support come from? Obviously, in this case, your wings might have some information. In those punt situations, we tell our line judge to head downfield as soon as the ball is snapped. I think if, as a line judge, you got to have your ears on, and if you hear that sound of a block kick or the fans, a lot of times the fans will tell you what happened. Get your eyes back into that backfield, and maybe you can provide some additional assistance as you retreat, as opposed to just heading downfield and not paying attention. Pre-snap, I think, is also a critical piece in all this, reminding yourself who's kicking, who's receiving, and just pregame. We always joke about you pregame it to happen, it's likely going to happen. So have a good pregame, talk through some of these things. And that's really all I had for tonight. So with that said, Scott, do you have anything, or were you able to monitor the chat for any questions or assistance on that? And I'll give you an opportunity to have the last word.
All right, let me go through the chat again. I was just looking here. Also, the stuff I saw was about just signals and stuff. I don't see any questions here other than kind of just commenting what we said. Take your time. There's no rush. Once that play's over, it's over. We don't need to, make a quick signal. A couple things people have mentioned is, don't overturn a signal. Make the first signal the correct signal.
Well, amen to that.
And so don't if you don't know, come talk about it first and then make a signal afterwards. Because nothing's going to look worse than making a signal and then having an official say, no, this happened. And then, no matter what happens after that point, all of a sudden you've just lost any potential point of discussion with the coach that's going to get the short end of the stick on that one.
All right. Anything else, Scott? I kind of got booted out of my own meeting there for a sec. I had some technical difficulties tonight. Thank you guys all for joining. Scott, anything else you want to throw in?
No, I think we've had some good discussion.